Hi, welcome to a Lord of the Rings Online tier list of the regions in the game. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to test each region with 6 criteria. Lore, questing, landscape, crafting, enemy variety, and fun. So breaking those down really quick, lore. What's happening in the zone? What's the story? Is it very lore rich in like past lore in Middle Earth, or is it like got a good story that is very immersive? Questing. How does the quest flow? Is it good flow? Is it interesting? Does it bring you into the world of Middle Earth? Is it piggyback off of the major story in the books? 3, landscape. How pretty is the zone? How immersive is the zone? Is the zone easy to navigate, or is it kind of a pain to navigate? 4, crafting. Is it a good zone to farm crafting materials? Or is it a zone where it's very sparse and not a good place to go crafting? Number 5, enemy variety. Is there a good variety of enemies to fight? Because you are going to be fighting enemies. Is it just orcs, or is there like 5 or 6 different varieties of enemies? I find that to be important. And then the 6th criteria is fun. Is the zone fun to play in? If it's not fun, then you're not going to want to play in it. So those are my 6 criteria. And my categories over here in the tier list are amazing, great, good, okay, and bad, and have not quested in. So amazing being like my S tier, these are the best zones in the game. Great being, I love these zones, they're just not my favorite. Good is kind of middle of the road, didn't like them, didn't hate them. Okay is just kind of neutral. Bad is I really didn't like these zones. Okay, so that's kind of the groundwork, and then we're going to get into each zone individually. All right, the first one on our list is Breland. And so what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to go into the game, into the actual map, and discuss the regions and why I'm ranking it as such. So, Breland, the lore. So the lore is extremely rich in this zone. You're kind of in the center of the ruined kingdom of Arnor. Arnor being that kind of second to Gondor, and was the primary in like the second age of Middle Earth. And Elendil was the king and all that, and Elendil died. Well, after the War of the Alliance, Arnor started to decline, and when Angmar comes into the picture, really wages a war on Arnor, and Arnor splits into Arthedain, Rhudaur, and Cardoon. And so Breland is kind of in the middle, and it's kind of a book to the ruin of Arnor. So there's tons of lore all throughout this zone and references and deed logs, and just you'll run across a castle that's ruined and you'll read some history on it, and it used to be a fortress of Cardoon. Like the Barrow Downs, North and South Barrow Downs, these were burial grounds for the Dunedain of Cardoon to the south. So the lore is super rich, awesome lore in this zone. The storyline and the questing, you follow the footsteps of the Fellowship. So literally you start as a man in Archet, come through here, you follow the hobbits as they come in the book story through Buckland and into the Old Forest. You actually follow in their footsteps, and you come across Aragorn and Gandalf in Breetown, and then you deal with some of the Nazgul Black Riders and some of the brigands and all of that. And you actually follow the Fellowship into the Lone Lands. So the story in Breland is excellent, top-notch. The landscape is quite interesting. You have that dark, dreary forest in the Old Forest. You have Buckland, which is a really cool hobbit settlement. You have the North and South Barrow Downs, which is full of whites, so it's very dark and oppressive. You have all these ruins in the south of Bree. You have the Midgewater Marsh, which is full of goblins. The Chetwood is this really, really cool, thick forest. And to the north of Breetown, you get a lot of farmland. So the landscape is excellent. It's fun to travel in. There's good variety. Now, crafting. How is it in crafting? This is an excellent zone for crafting Tier 1 and Tier 2. And I believe you can get into a little bit of Tier 3 down here before you get to the Lone Lands. Maybe not. I might be wrong on that. But for example, like Scholar, right here on the be the east side of Breetown is like probably the best place to get Scholar artifacts, level 1, other than maybe Swanfleet in the south. So crafting is excellent. Enemy variety. You have the Whites in the Barrow Downs. You have goblins to fight in the Midgewater marshes and like spiders and water bugs. You have brigands in the Chetwood and kind of North Bree. And you have orcs up towards North Downs and Trestlebridge. So there is a excellent variety of enemies. Of course, there's lots of bears and wolves and boars and stuff like that. And then fun. Is the zone fun to play in? I love Bree. It's one of my favorite zones to play in. The music's awesome. The story is very engaging. Even the side quests are really fun. Like I remember this Adsos camp right here. It's like a hobbit little settlement. He's trying to build an inn in between Buckland and Bree. And I found those to be fun. And then you get up into the work site. And those are fun quests. So all that to say, we're going to go back to our tier list right here. All that to say, all those high rankings, I'm going to put Bree in an amazing category. It's an amazing zone. It's one of the best zones in the game. All right, so number 2 on our list is Cardolan. So Cardolan is right south of Bree, and this was added later on in the game. So there is some benefit in having some updated textures, and the landscape looks a little bit nicer than the old school zones and regions. So the lore of this zone, quite interesting. Going along with Bree, it's that Cardolan's that third ruined city of Arnor, or that ruined faction of Arnor, and Cardolan just gets completely devastated over the years. And so when you transition into the zone, you come into Tharbad, and Tharbad was a settlement of the Dunedain, very well populated. It's kind of a river city built over the river of the Grey Flood, and it gets devastated by that plague, and it's like it never really recovers, and it gets abandoned. So there's just tons of elaborate, humongous ruins through this whole zone. And the storyline in the questing, you find Boromir from the Fellowship of the Ring in Tharbad, and he's kind of stuck by orcs, and you help free him, and he gets out of there, and you go along with a ranger and a maiden of Rohan, and you travel together into the little settlement of Herne. And progressing that storyline further, you get attacked by Whites from kind of the Barrow area, and then you follow along Boromir's story when he goes to Rohan, gets a horse, and he actually gets confronted by Saruman. So I actually love the questing in Cardolan. It's really fun. The main quests. The side quests are, they're kind of forgettable, a little bit lacking. The main book quest in Cardolan is excellent. The landscape. The zone is really pretty. It's got that like really pretty rugged land, but you feel the sorrow and the what has been lost. Like at Coronos, there's this really cool fortress at Coronos, and it's just completely overrun by orcs. It's pretty easy to traverse. There's a lot of roads. The questing does kind of send you everywhere, and the questing is a little bit of a mess in terms of level, because Tharbad's pretty high level, and up here towards Bree is kind of high level, but in the middle is kind of low level. So it's kind of jolting in the flow and the landscape where you're supposed to go in the questing. So that'd be probably the only thing I don't like about this zone, is it just sends you all over the place, and it's hard to know what you're supposed to be doing. Crafting. It's an excellent place to craft. Herne has a crafting hall, and close by it has a vault, and it has an auctioneer. So it's an excellent place to craft. I do a lot of crafting in that area. Also, right outside of Herne, there's lots of crafting materials, mining, wood. So it's a good place for crafting. It gets a high ranking for that. And enemy variety. So you get a lot of orcs in Tharbad. You get a lot of brigands in the Rudi Moor. There is a quest line in the Sarn Ford where you get a cutscene where, and this happens in the book too, where the Nazgul come across here into Sarn Ford, and the Rangers try to waylay them. So that's a really cool thing in that. The Old Forest has a bunch of spiders. Dol Urnir has like Barrow Whites, and you get more goblins up here in the South Downs. So, and of course, there's tons of bears and boars. So enemy variety is top-notch, excellent. It's high ranking for that. So, and then our last category is fun. Is it a fun place to quest in? I really, really enjoy it. I like the music is really great. It's an extremely immersive zone. It's really pretty. You know, there's always something to be doing in this zone. In fact, that's another probably downside of the zone. There's almost too much to do, where if you go through all of the quests in the zone, you'll be so highly leveled that you'll kind of have to skip Lone Lands and North Downs almost. So again, the only downside to the zone, I think, is the questing and just how it kind of sends you around everywhere. So we're going to put Cardolan, all that to say, we're going to put Cardolan in a great category. It's a great zone. It's not quite my favorite because it has some things I don't like about it, mainly the quests. All right, next on our list is the Dead Marshes. Well, this one is yikes. So first of all, to even navigate on the map to find the Dead Marshes is a pain, because you would think, oh, it's like in Mordor in the Waste and you go up through here and, you know, the Dead Marshes is supposed to be here, but there's not even like a way to click it on the map. So you have to go to Gondor and then north of the Wastes. See that? Dead Marshes. So this is probably the most underdeveloped. They couldn't even like put it in the map. I don't know. This zone is terrible. It's full of dead bodies in the marsh, so like it's supposed to be gross, oppressive, nasty. You're not supposed to like want to go there. But even how you get here is super weird. You're going through the quest line in Gondor in Dol Amroth, and you get like a quest that sends you to the Dead Marshes to like play out Sam and Frodo and Schmiegel's story arc. But you play through this, and it's like it's so hard to find anything. It's really ugly. You can't. It's all reeds and water, and it just dismounts you constantly. So the lore of this zone is this is a big battle site of the War of the Last Alliance, so it has all the corpses of elves and men and dwarfs and orcs. And that's really the only thing going for it, and then you follow Sam, Frodo, and Smeagol as they go through here. Questing, it's just... that's the only quest in this zone. Landscape, it's really bad. Crafting, really bad. Enemy variety, you don't go here to fight enemies. And is it fun? It was so irritating to go through here. So, not trying to be negative, I'm just trying to be real. So, all that to say, the Dead Marshes gets a bad rating. Alright, our next zone is Dunland. And Dunland is a really unique zone. First of all, well, the lore of the zone. So Dunland is following the story arc of the Dunlandings, and you come in there into Galtrev. And now Dunland was kind of this, the men of Dunland were there before, and then the men of Numenor, like Arnor and Gondor, come in. And so there's all this hostility, all this pent-up bad history, bad blood between the Dunlandings and the Gondorians and the Arnorians. Well, Gondor ended up gifting Rohan at the time a different people, and they gifted them the area of Rohan. So then Dunland really hates Rohan too. So there's all this stuff that you kind of get involved in, you get roped up into, but not all Dunlandings are against the Free Peoples. And not all Dunlandings are allied with Saruman. So you kind of come across that. There are good Dunlandings and bad Dunlandings, for lack of a better term. So interesting as well is the zone right before this is in Edenwaith, and you can choose to come through the Lich Bluffs, you come to the south, or you come through the Mornshaws. So that's kind of an interesting... You have two options. Questing. The questing is really good. Galtrev is like the main hub of this zone, and your questing, they'll send you out and you'll do things and you'll come back to Galtrev. So it's kind of centralized, and so the quest flow is really, really nice. I like it. The landscape, it's really pretty. It's really unique. It's like a hilly savanna kind of zone. You get Tal Methadress up in the north, and this is like a neutral faction of Dunlandings, and there's this giant frozen lake and frozen area that was super fun to quest in. You come up there with your rangers, and the quest line, when you get through here, you are with the Grey Company, which is the Dunedain, the Rangers of the North, all coming together to accompany Aragorn as he is going to become king. So there's good, interesting storytelling in this zone, and this actually, you can get the Ranger outfit cosmetic gear when you complete this zone, so that was really fun. And then you get the Dunbog down here in the bottom left part of the zone, and that's interesting. Just different kind of biomes. There's a lot of crafting. So crafting, right, if you click on Gautrev, crafting has an excellent spot right here to the west of Gautrev, where I, to this day, will send a character out here to mine and to get artifacts and to get forest material to harvest wood. So this is a top notch in the crafting department. Enemy variety, there's lots of Dunlendings, there's lots of Uruk-hai from Saruman, since we're close to Isengard. There's lots of beasts. So variety is really, really fun. I like it. And then fun. Is this zone fun to play in? And I think it is. Every time I've quested through here, which has been twice, I have 2 high-level characters. I think this zone is great. It's very enjoyable. I don't find myself wanting to get through it quickly. I find myself really enjoying my time in this zone. So all of that to say, I think Dunland gets an amazing tier. It's a great zone on all those 6 criteria. All right, our next zone is the Elderslade. Now, this is a dwarf settlement in the north, right before Mount Gundabad. This is a higher level expansion, so you have to click on Gundabad and Elderslade. So the lore of this zone, well, there is a lot of really good lore in the terms of, this is where the dwarves originated, out of Mount Gundabad. This is where Dethlin the Duras woke up, Durin the Deathless, woke up in Gundabad. So there's a lot of dwarven lore here that's really cool. There's a lot of dwarven settlements. The questing of this zone pretty much has to deal with the War of the Three Peaks. So the dwarves are coming up to Gundabad to retake it after the fall of Sauron. So this is like after the War of the Ring kind of content. And the questing was good. It kind of reminded me, surprisingly enough, of like a World War I kind of war, where as you progress north, you come across like these big ditches where dwarves and orcs are like entrenched fighting each other. So that it was like big battles. It was interesting. There were some pretty cool epic battles involved. So I liked the questing. Landscape, I'm not as much of a fan of the landscape. It's pretty linear. Like there's one road and it's very hilly, mountainy, rocky. The Gates of Gundabad is a really cool area. Gundabad is very grandiose, very large. But I didn't like traversing this because I remember like it takes you up. You got to go back to the north. It just takes you forever, it seemed like, to get anywhere in the zone. So I'm not really a fan of the landscape. Crafting. I only have one character who went through here, and he was a miner, and it was excellent for mining. There's mining minerals everywhere. As you find, the later on zones are pretty good. They're pretty well populated with minerals for crafting. Enemy variety, it's just all orcs. There's some trolls in this area. There is a lot of dragons and drakes in the northern parts, which dragons and drakes are always really fun to fight against. So enemy variety, I'd say gets a higher ranking. It feels more impactful to be fighting big bad enemies, if that makes sense. And then fun. I would say the the War of the Three Peaks stuff was really fun. The overall open world landscape I did not enjoy nearly as much. So all that to say, I think Elderslade gets a good category. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I liked it. I'm not neutral towards it. I think it was a good addition to the game. I think it gets a good rating. All right, our next zone is Edenwaith. Edenwaith is the zone right above Dunland, so I kind of mentioned that a little bit because Edenwaith and Dunland are really closely tied, like the Gap of Rohan and the Isengard zone. So you come down from Eregion, and the lore of Edenwaith is similar to Eregion. It's like an Eregion mixed in with Dunland kind of lore. And Edwaith is pretty empty. It's pretty barren. And I believe the lore of this zone beforehand was this was kind of the foresting operation of the Kingdom of Arnor. And when the Dunlendings didn't like that, there was some kind of guerrilla warfare, and so the Arnorians just kind of harvested a lot of the woods. So the Dunlendings are not friendly in this area. And as you travel to Dunland, you can actually choose to go to the Lich Bluffs, which is like the Barrow Downs, lots of whites, or you can go to the Mornshaws, which has been like really devastated by this deforesting. So there's really good lore in this zone. I really enjoyed the lore. Questing, you just kind of go north to south, and I honestly don't remember the questing being really standoutish. There is Thor's Combe over here, kind of to the right. That would be the east. And it's like a mountain, and there's a dwarf settlement, like a big dwarf library, and there's a lot of history of the dwarfs, like where they went to after the Lonely Mountain got taken by Smaug. So there's some interesting lore involved in that. Landscape, it's a really pretty zone. It's like that blend between Eregion, which is one of my favorite zones, and Dunland, which is also one of my favorite zones. So naturally, I'm going to like this zone a lot. The biome, there's lots of different biomes. It's really nice to be in there. Enemy variety, or crafting. I don't remember it to be good or bad for crafting. It was kind of neutral, except in the Windfells. There is a really weird hyperspawn, and I'm going to make a video on these hyperspawns later. But if it's nighttime, there's a little spot like right about here where there's this like group of goats that get like tainted by some dark energy. I don't know what that's about in lore, but they have like a ridiculous hyperspawn where they spawn like every 2 seconds. So what I did is I figured this out, and I left my hunter there for like a month, and I would just log in every now and then, and I just farm. Whenever it was dark, I would just farm these, and I got like an insane amount of magnificent hides. So it gets a super high rating for crafting because this is a hyper farm zone for tailors. Enemy variety, it's just a lot of Dunlendings. There is at Thor's Combe, there's some giants and there's drakes. So that's great. I'm not remembering what's in the Mornshaws, unfortunately, but I know there are wraiths down here. So it gets a high rating for enemy variety and fun. I remember this zone being kind of annoying, I'll be honest. Going back and forth from Thor's Combe, it's like this really high mountain, and there's not a really good way to traverse it, and so I found myself kind of annoyed by that. And I think I even just kind of skipped the main quest, which is kind of a no-no. So unfortunately, I think the fun category takes a hit. So all that to say, I think Enedwaith, I think it gets a great category. I like it. All right, Ered Luin. So Ered Luin is the starting zone of the dwarfs in the north, the race of dwarfs, and also the starting zone of the elves down in the south of the zone. So kind of an interesting 2-for-1 zone in that respect. The lore of Ered Luin is quite interesting. The Blue Mountains for the dwarfs are really important, even in like the first age of Middle-earth, when Beleriand hadn't been sunk yet. There were a lot of dwarf settlements in this area, so there's some ancient history involved with that. The overall quest line, there's not really, like, there is a main quest line, but it's not really tied to, like, the book quest, like from the Fellowship of the Ring, where it starts in Breland. So the questing is, you kind of help the dwarves, and you kind of head down to the south, and then if you're on the elven side, you're kind of dealing with some goblins and some of those, and you kind of come up to the north, and you both dwarf and elf kind of meet in the middle, and you're like following the tracks of a missing elf, and about Gondaman and Keldul, you have the Dour Hands, which are like an evil faction of dwarfs. And that's kind of all that's really going on for the questing and the lore. It's not bad, but it's not like really super standoutish, unfortunately. I just noticed there's a To the Grey Havens right here. but you can't click it, so that's definitely something they're going to add, I'm sure, later on to the game, so that's interesting. Landscape, this zone is really pretty. I started my journey in Dwarf Guardian and Thorn's Gate, so I love this area. Very nostalgic for me. And then my next character was an elf hunter, and you start in Celadem. And Celadem and Doyland are really pretty. They're really amazingly well done zones, even to this day. This, 2006 or whatever the game came out. So the landscape's great. The travelability is pretty good. It makes sense, the quest flow to some degree. You kind of get to Gondaman as kind of the central hub of this zone, and you kind of quest all around Gondaman. It is kind of weird once you're done with this zone to try and get to Bree. It's a little bit strange. And I think because there's not like a lot of, there's no zones in here or here. So the game where it is now just hasn't really filled out these other areas, unfortunately. Crafting, this is not a very good place to get crafting material. And it feels really bad. If you're like going for mining, prospecting, there is so few nodes, and this is not a very good place to be harvesting crafting material. Breeland is a significantly better place. Enemy variety, you have a lot of wolves down here in the south in the elf area. Then you get into a lot of goblins. And then Kudul and Gondaman in the south, you get a lot of Dourhand dwarfs, which is like that evil faction of dwarfs. And then kind of to the north of that, there is a burial site that has some whites. There's some spiders here in between. So there's a good variety of enemies. Not the best, but there's good variety. And then fun. Is this zone fun to be in? I don't really... I remember it fun in the sense that it was very nostalgic because it was the first place I tried to play. I have since tried to play another character in here, and I was super, super bored. So I don't know how much of that is me just experiencing the game for the first time and loving it, and how much of it's like, it's kind of mediocre, right? So I think I have to go kind of middle of the road to be fair. So all that to say, I think Eriador, it gets a good rating for me. If I was going purely off nostalgia and starting this in my journey in Lord of the Rings Online, I'd rate it super higher than this, but I think realistically, I think it gets about the middle of the road. All right, the next zone is Ered Mithrin, or the Withered Heath. So this is also in the north area, kind of where we were in the Elder Slate and Gundabad. This is a very, very far north. So the lore of this zone is just kind of similarly tied to Gundabad. Lots of dwarf history here. More so with this zone, there's dwarf history between the dwarves and the Frostrakes of the north. So there's a lot of that going on. Scarhald is the main area, and it is completely dilapidated and messed up. So questing here, actually I found the questing to be really frustrating because a lot of it is you're kind of in the central hub of Scarhald, and they're like, hey, can you go over here and do this? Can you check that out? There's dragon activity over here. There's orc activity over there. It was just so chore-like. It was like, go do this, go do that, and a lot of times they send you up into Scarhald, and the map is really hard to understand. I just was not a fan of this area. It proved to be more of an annoyance for me in the questing. Landscape, it's kind of volcanic. It's volcanic and snowy, and then the south parts are very wooded. So it's really not a pretty place to be in. The frozen area up here was interesting, but I didn't spend a lot of time up there. Granted, I didn't do any instances or raids or anything like that. I'm just going through the open world solo play, right? Crafting, it was similar to Elder Slade, and it was, it's pretty well populated with crafting materials. So as you go along these long roads, you'll just see stuff and you'll stop and you get them, right? So not any hyper farm spots that I have found. Enemy variety, there is lots of orcs because we're close to Gundabad. There is a faction of wood trolls down here in the Thornholt. There was a lot of trolls up here towards the Glimmerdeep, And then there were a lot of drakes up here to the north. So the enemy variety was fun. It had good variety of enemies. And then fun of the zone. I don't know. I just didn't like this zone. I found myself wanting to get out of this zone quickly and being stuck with quests that were annoying, if that makes sense. So I think because of that, I think it just gets an okay rating. I didn't hate it, but I didn't really like it. And I'm not sure, it wasn't very memorable. It didn't add anything really to my experience of Lord of the Rings Online. All right, the next zone is Eregion, and I love this zone. All right, so the lore of Eregion is this was Celebrimbor's main settlement area. So Celebrimbor being the elven smith in the Second Age that forged the Rings of Power. If you've watched, unfortunate for you, if you've watched the Rings of Power TV series, Eregion is where that climactic battle ends up happening. I'm not a fan of Rings of Power, but moving on. So Eregion has that lore. There's lots of rich history in this zone, and when you get there, it's just completely dilapidated. Sorry, I'll click on here. It's completely dilapidated. Just everything's a ruin. It's a mess. There are some little elf settlements. So the questing in this area, you come there and you kind of follow in the footsteps of the Fellowship. So you find their camping sites. You think they go through the Red Horn Pass, and so you go up there to try and see if they did, and you find out they didn't, and then you end up discovering, hey, they went to Moria, and then you report back to Elrond that, hey, they went to Moria. That's kind of a yikes. So the questing is really cool. There's a lot of deed questing in this zone too, but it's enjoyable. It's really good questing. Even the side quests, if you get down here into Echid Morgul, and then there's Tharm, Moran. There's all these really cool side things that you kind of want to go over there and do. Landscape, it's really pretty and kind of a sad what was lost kind of way. That this zone really encapsulates what the elves lost when Sauron sieged this area. Crafting, this is one of my favorite areas to get crafting material, and the reason is when you're up here in the north, you come in here to Gringwis, I think is the elven settlement up here. You have the tier that you get in Angmar. So if you've been questing in Angmar and you're ready to move on and you're not quite up to snuff on your crafting, you can come to Eregion and get caught up, and I love that. I love it when a zone, so about right here, the zone is a tier this, and it's 6 or 7, whatever tier it is. And then once you get past High Holland, it starts to switch to the next tier. So this is an excellent zone to get caught up on all your professions. And I always end up getting to this point, and every time I get to a new zone, I'm like, hey, where's my crafting? I do a lot of crafting in the game. It's one of my favorite things. And then Eregion is always where I get caught up. It's just really well populated with crafting, and it's real easy to get to that point of catching up before you get into Moria. Enemy variety. There's a lot of wood trolls up here in the north. There is, I'm trying to remember, there's a lot of orcs around Eregion, all around the settlements. There is some mad spirits of mountain over here in the Red Horn Pass. And in the south, you find a lot of Dunlendings. Excuse me. Right here in the middle, there's a whole warg infestation, which coincides with the story of the Fellowship. When they have to let Bill go because they're getting into Moria and they're afraid that the wargs are going to eat them. So there's a lot of that going on. And then the walls of Moria are actually attached to this zone because the way it came out in the game, this released, and then the walls of Moria, and then later on Moria, I believe. So the walls of Moria is excellent too. Maybe the walls of Moria came with Moria. I might be incorrect in that. Is it fun? I think this zone is super, super fun. Love this zone. I always find myself when I'm in Angmar or Forchel or even Evendim. Those zones are okay. I like those zones, especially Evendim. But I'm man, I really want to get to Eregion. And then when I get to Eregion and it's time to go to Moria, I'm man, I wish I could stay in Eregion longer. So I think because of that, because I want to get to this zone and I want to stay in this zone, I think it gets an amazing rating. It's a great zone. All right, the next zone is Erin or the Dale Lands. So this zone, popping up to bigger here, the lore is super rich with this, obviously. You got the Lonely Mountain, the whole story arc of the Hobbit book ends up here. You got the city of Dale outside the Lonely Mountain. You know, Lonely Mountain was where Smaug is, and the dwarfs go there with Bilbo. You got Dale, where Bard, shot down. Well, I guess it'd be Lake Town, technically, Esgaroth. So Dale, but Dale's remade, and then the old city of Dale. You got all this here. You got Raven Hill, super important in the book. So the lore is like S tier. This is a great zone. You get Lake Town, you get Fellogroth, which is the Wood Elf capital, like where Legolas is from. Questing. I don't remember. Honestly, it's strange. You come from the Vales of Anduin, from Beorn, and you get into Fellogroth, and I don't really remember this zone, which stinks, because it's like, wow, I should remember this. And I think it's because when I got into this is technically North Mirkwood, because below this would be South Mirkwood. I think it was just so hard to traverse, and I think I was bored that I just like put on a TV show and just kind of, no lifed it. Just kind of W forward through this zone. So I don't really remember a lot of the quests, but I remember the landscapes and the things in it. Now that could just be where I was in life. But I don't know. I don't remember any of the quests in here. And it felt like I got here and it was super nostalgic, but it was like the aftermath of the battle, of the battles that I know of from the books and lore. And even in the War of the Ring, there was a battle here, but it was even after that. So you're just kind of picking up the breadcrumbs. And so I just felt like kind of a miss for me. I don't know. I just didn't really engage with the zone. Crafting. Crafting kind of sucks in this zone. There's not a lot going on in Fellogroth. Now, granted, I haven't leveled a forester to this high of level, so I bet the forest would be good for a forester, but as a metalsmith prospector, it just wasn't very good. It was okay in the Dale area, but Dale's a really large city like Breland. Enemy variety. You have orcs, you have goblins. You get a lot of... You get some spiders in this area, too. And then to the north of the zone, I believe there's some... You get some, like, Drake-like things if you're heading to the North Dwarven areas. Was it fun? I think it was fun from a nostalgia standpoint, and I think it was fun. Like, you find the bones of Smaug, and Lake Town quests are really fun. Other than that, again, I just don't really remember all the stuff that was going on here. So, kind of unfortunate. So all that to say, I believe this gets I think it gets, because of the nostalgia, because they did a good job with the landscape, like it looks like Erebor, it looks like Lake Town. I think it gets about middle of the road. All right, Far Anorian. So Far Anorian, this is the point when you get into Gondor. Honestly, I'm not sure why they ended up doing this. When you get into Rohan, they started doing this, where rather than an individual zone, which is what I prefer, they kind of lump it in. So like East Rohan is like all of these zones, West Rohan is all these zones. When you get into Rohan, it's like Central Rohan, Central Rohan, Western, Central, Eastern, Old, and Far. Confusing. I don't know why they ended up doing that way. I'm not a huge fan of just like being able to like traverse it. Once you're familiar with it, it's fine. So, all that being said, here's Far Anorian. The lore of this zone, really, this is where the Rohirrim come after the Battle of Helm's Deep. They come across this whole area to the Battle of Pelennor Field. So that's what's going on in this zone. Lore-wise, there are the Pukul men. So like the wild men live in this area, like from the books. They are in this game. Questing wise, man, the questing in this area, it was so weird. I don't know if I did it incorrectly, because my first character I played through, I didn't get a quest to come through here, and I was like, what's that Farinorian? So I came from the Rohan side thinking I'd pick up the book quest somewhere, and never did, so I just like traveled this whole road, and this whole road is just like blockades and nothing. There's no quest, there's nothing here, and there's like the crafting in this area stinks. And then my second higher level character, the way you get into this zone is you come from the Gondor side, which is weird, because you come from like the wild men, and then you end up like, hey, the Rohirrim are like being waylaid and slowed down. So you come from the Druidon. Yeah, this whole area. You come from this area. Now the Druidon were interesting. The wild men. That was about the only thing going for this zone. Questing was bad. Landscape I didn't like. It was just ugly, and it was just took forever to get anywhere. Crafting, there was just like nothing going on here. Just enemy variety, it was just like some orcs occasionally. Kind of lame and fun. I did not like this zone. I wanted to get out of this zone. So I don't know if it's the time period of where the game, I don't know if this was just a bad time for the company, so they didn't put a lot of work into this or what, or there just wasn't a lot to go on from the lore. But I put Farinorian in bad. I did not like it. I wanted to get out of it. Alright, now the zone of Foreshell. So this is the frozen zone in the north of Eriador, above the zone of, or region of Evendim. So the lore of Foreshell is very fascinating. So when Arnor, the last king of Arnor, right before it fractured into the three lesser kingdoms, his name was Arfadui, and he traveled in the north to escape the Witch King who was after him. And he ended up getting stranded in this frozen wasteland, and the Losoth people, who are natives to this area, ended up helping him and giving him food and stuff. And then Kirion, the shipwright, the elven shipwright, when he heard word that Arfadui was stranded here, he sent a ship into the frozen bay, and Arfadui got on the ship, and the Losoth people said, don't do that because it'll freeze and it's very treacherous waters, and he didn't listen. He ended up getting stranded and drowned, he and all his people with him, and he ended up losing a Palantir, which is the Seeing Stone. So lots of really cool lore in this zone. Questing wise, you come from the south, and you get to these questing hubs, and you just kind of help the Losoth people, and eventually you find that shipwreck. So the questing was really good, and you kind of have to quest around this big lake, kind of like Evendim. Landscape, it's a really pretty frozen, kind of Antarctic kind of zone. It does take a while to get anywhere, but it's like a pleasant area. Also, there's a dwarf settlement in Ziggelgrind over here, which was pretty cool to find. Crafting wise, this is a really good place for crafting materials. I think this is a better place than Angmar, and this is a good place right before you get to Eregion as well. So I really liked this place for gathering materials. Enemy variety, there's a lot of it's a lot of animals. It's a lot of landscape livestock. There's some of one of those Druidine, they're like orcs that dress up like wolves. Some of those people are here. There's a lot of like bears. There's a lot of like spirit wraiths going on in this zone. So there's good enemy variety. It doesn't feel boring. There's a lot of mammoths and stuff, so that's kind of a unique enemy in Lord of the Rings Online. So is it fun? This zone is really fun. This is a really, really good zone. I think the only thing that I don't like about this zone is just there's not a lot of travel points. But you know, that makes it feel more expensive and large. So I'd say it's either amazing or great. I don't think it's quite amazing because it's just that main quest line. And the main quest is good, but the side quests are not nearly as enjoyable. So I think it's definitely better than Cardwin. Yeah, I think it's the highest of the great. Alright, and now Mount Gundabad. So Mount Gundabad is kind of it kind of refers to several zones, similar to Moria. So this is kind of the overarching view of Gundabad, and if you click on like Madagard, it's the first kind of area you come to. It's this giant city around a big cavern, Then you have Deepsgrave, Stonejaws, Tor Bronach. You have you have the Glooming Tarn, Glovencap, and the Welkin Lofts. So there is, what is that, 7 zones? Gundabad's kind of a pain to get to in terms of zone of the map. So the lore of Gundabad is pretty vast. This is where the dwarfs originated, where Durin the Deathless awoke. And in fact, a cool part of this lore is right here in this island in the middle of Glooming Tarn. You discover that's the area that Durin first awoke. So there's lots of really, really cool dwarven lore here, lots of stuff going on. The quest line that brings you here, you're here to retake this ancient homeland, and Durin, the current leader of the dwarfs, and Durin is a common name, but they just passed through the dwarfs. He feels like it's time to be here, and he's like hearing voices and stuff. And then eventually you find like an ancient dwarf buried in the, I think it was the Stonejaw. Yeah, it was the Stonejaw zone. And then you find all of this like history between the original Durin and this guy who's still alive, and when the original Durin left to settle the Moria dwarven at the time Khazad-dûm. So lots, like the lore was just super expansive in this area. So lore, I thought a 10 out of 10. I thought that I was really enthralled with the lore. It was great. Questing wise, it quests really nice actually. So you start in Madagard, and you kind of quest around this whole cavernous area. Then you get into Deepsgrave, and then it sends you to the Stonejaws, and then you go to Glooming Tarn, then Glovencap, Welkin Lofts, and Tor Bronach. So you actually make a giant circle, which is really, really cool. And individually, like the zones, there's some in the landscape in terms. The Madagard is really cool. It feels like a giant abandoned city. That's neat. Deepsgrave is this like scaffolding, platforming place. I actually did not like this zone at all. It was a cool concept, but there's like 10 levels, and it's so hard to traverse. And so the only travel point is right in the middle, and it's this giant like spiral staircase where you can get to all the levels. But man, it was a pain to get everywhere. The Pit of the Stonejaws, it's like a big cavern with like stalactites, and it was kind of interesting. There's a big settlement in the middle. A lot of the major lore happens in a tomb in this zone. Then the Glooming Tarn, which I think was my favorite, one of my favorite of the Gundabad expansion, because of this giant lake. It reminded me of that Harry Potter lake, or something where like Voldemort like hides his treasure in that underground lake. Just similar vibes. This is a really cool zone, really unique to Lord of the Rings Online. And then Glovencap was really neat. It had this like open cavern, so it had a lot of like plant life in it. And then Welkin Lofts is like the top of the mountain, and there's actually an ice dragon. It's like your main protagonist. So really, really cool. I really liked Gundabad as a whole. I thought it was pretty good with landscape. Crafting, it was really well populated with crafting materials. No complaint there. It got a pretty good rating on that regard. Enemy variety, it's a lot of Gundabad orcs. It's a lot of trolls. I got a little tired of fighting orcs, if I'm honest. So I think that actually gets a little bit of a bad rating. There's just tons, especially in the like Deepsgrave. I remember there were a ton of trolls in this one. The Stonejaws had a lot of just like cave crawlers, spiders, things like that. The Glooming Tarn had a lot. Yeah, there's a whole spider settlement in this area, and then there were some kind of like diseased goblins over here. So I guess there was some variety in this zone. I take that back. Actually, as you get into this area, there's an Angmar settlement in this area, and there's a ton of wargs in here. There's some frost drakes to the north, and then in Tor Bronach, this is kind of interesting. It actually attaches to Angmar, so there's a lot of Angmarian and Dour hands in this area. So enemy variety was actually really good as an expansion as a whole. And was it fun? I actually really enjoyed this area a lot. Yeah, it was really fun. I was really enthralled by the storyline. It kept me interested in wanting to play more. I actually think Gundabad was an amazing zone overall. I thought it was really enjoyable. It had a very awesome epic ending with a frost drake, or dragon actually. All right, the next zone is the Iron Hills. So the Iron Hills is over there by Erebor. So this, I was really excited for this zone, and it was a little bit of a letdown. So the lore of this is basically, this is the longest surviving dwarven settlement, which is kind of fascinating, because like Moria was lost, the Lonely Mountain was lost, Gundabad was lost, and so this is like the only like stalwart settlement of the dwarfs. But the lore, you kind of come across from the Dale Lands, and I think you're just like sending a message to talk to the settlement over here. But Yarnfast is supposedly the main settlement, but it was kind of weird. It was like really small, and it wasn't very in depth. You couldn't go very many places. I was also confused by the questing. So that kind of leads into the questing area. There was one quest line where you are trying to shut out. There's like nameless ones, so like what you find in the depths of Moria, they're like kind of resurfacing, and so the dwarves are like trying to shut them out. Then you kind of go up here to Hammerstead, and you're dealing with some issues in that area. I think that's where you shut off the faceless ones, or the, whatever they're called, nameless ones. And then you come down here to Utterby, and there is a settlement of Easterlings that kind of defected after the war, and they're just like, they're not really hostile, but they're not really friendly. That whole quest line was okay, but it just seemed kind of strange to me. Now, in context of there was a great battle in Erebor, it makes sense, but in Iron Hills, it just felt kind of odd to me. Landscape, it's Iron Hills, and so it's, it's like a bronzy iron color, because it's where they get all the material for iron. The dwarf statue was really cool, like this giant dwarf mountain statue. That was neat. Scald's Drop, there was this thing in the south of the zone where it's like a giant cliff, and I died on that so many times because I was confused where I was supposed to go. So landscape is kind of a pain, I'll be honest, with this zone. I didn't really like it. Crafting wise, it was really good for mining and for foresting. It was a good zone for getting crafting material, as a lot of the newer zones, this is like level 130-ish. A lot of the newer zones are really good. It's well populated overall. Enemy variety, there's some Easterlings here. There's a lot of wildlife. I believe there were some trolls and orcs up in the north area, but the enemy variety was kind of boring. I didn't really enjoy the enemies in the area. And then fun, it felt more like go here, do this, do that, do this. Especially in the Utterby area, I felt like it was a little chore-ish. I didn't really enjoy the quest line in this zone. So I think the Iron Hills gets I think it gets like a okay. It was alright. I didn't dislike it, but it wasn't like I wouldn't like necessarily look forward to going there again. Alright, so the next zone is Nan Kuranir. So this is also aka Isengard, and Kuranir is actually the name of Saruman, so I think it has something to do with his name. So this is the zone of Isengard. Now this is kind of a continuation zone of Dunland. It's kind of attached, as you can see, and the Gap of Rohan. So as you progress the storyline in Dunland and Gap of Rohan, you end up getting captured, and then you end up in here. So the lore of this zone is this was a settlement built by the Númenóreans, and that's why it's black, like obsidian, like that rare metal that they got from Númenor, which is also what they made the walls of Minas Tirith out of. And in the books, there's an interesting thing where the Ents destroy the outer wall, like no problem, but the Ents actually couldn't destroy the Tower of Orthanc because it has that rare mineral. So a lot of cool lore here. Saruman was basically gifted this tower because he was the chief of the Astari, the wizards, and he has a Palantir in this tower because it was basically a watchtower of Gondor, in between Gondor and Arnor. And over time, Saruman kind of turned to evil, and he deforested the area, made an orc army. So this zone is very bleak and dreary. And by the time you get here, the quest line was great because you get captured and you're in the dungeons of Orthanc, and you end up kind of working your way out and escaping, and then you get to play the instance of Treebeard and the hobbits, and you break the walls, and you end up flooding Isengard. So the questing line was great. Landscape, it's just kind of a dark, dreary, flooded mess. The Tower of Orthanc is really, really cool, but everything else in this area is kind of a mess. So not really a fun place to be in that regard. Crafting, it wasn't a really good place for getting crafting material. It's more about, this place is more about the story. Enemy variety, it's all orcs. I believe there were some trolls at the gate, but other than that, it was all orcs and Uruk-hai. I don't remember if these camps down to the south were Dunlendings or not. So was it fun? I really enjoyed playing this the first time, but I imagine if I were to go back and play it another time, it might be a little monotonous because I've already seen it again, so it might just be like the nostalgia factor was really cool. But I think overall, I think this was a good. It didn't disappoint me. It's what I thought Isengard would look like, and the instances were really fun. And it was really true to the lore of the books. Alright, the next zone is the Wells of Langflood. So this zone's kind of a weird one for me because when I came through here, you're helping the Bjornings. It's kind of tied in with the dwarfs and Elderslade and Ered Mithrin, but this one has more to do with the Bjornings. There is the housing settlement of Lindleby over here. It's a really, really pretty area, but unfortunately, I got here and then I was confused by the quests, and it just kind of sent me to the north, and I started questing down here, but I was confused. You come down here with Gloin, Gimli's father, and you find like a settlement, but it was kind of forgettable. And then the only other quest I remember is you go like south and you find like the bridge crossings. I'm assuming, yeah, this is the Anduin River. So you find the bridge crossings of the Anduin. Lore, I don't really know much about this one. I didn't really get any lore from the game that I remember, at least. Questing was kind of whatever, nothing really that memorable. Landscape, it's really, really pretty. It's really well done. It's very grandiose and epic. Crafting-wise, it had good materials. I remember it for Metalsmith and Prospector. I was able to level up quite a bit in my crafting while I was here. Enemy variety, there were a lot of orcs in this southern area. I remember there was a bridge that was pretty heavily defended by orcs. And then fun, I don't know, this zone was weird. I didn't spend much time here, maybe like a tops of 30 minutes total, like maybe 45. So I can't really say it was fun because I didn't spend enough time here, and I felt like it wasn't anything I did wrong. It was just like the game was pulling me elsewhere. So I think it was okay. I didn't dislike anything I was there, but you know, it wasn't anything interesting to keep me there longer than like 45 minutes. Alright, the next zone is the Lone Lands, and this is one of my all-time favorite zones in the game. I love the Lone Lands. It's kind of a lower level zone. It's right out of Bree. The lower of this area is when Arnor was like one whole kingdom. Weathertop was the watchtower of Amon Sul, and there was actually a Palantir here. And when Angmar started waging war, he had Arnor kind of factioned into those three settlements like we've talked about, and Rudaur and Angmar ended up waging war on this area. So I believe this was the kingdom of Cardlin or Arthedain, I can't remember. So this is all just ruined, desolate, hence the title The Lone Lands. So lots of really good lore in this zone, and you can really feel that when you're in here, that this used to be a really awesome fortress area, kingdom, and it's just devastated now. So this zone does a great job of like storytelling in the environment of that. So as you quest, you come in and you find the Forsaken Inn, which is actually mentioned a little bit in the books, and you help the people here in the Forsaken Inn. You go north and find a ranger, and you do a lot of these interesting quests. And then I love the quest like flow of this zone, because you start in the west and you travel this main road, and then like you'll stop, get off, do a couple quests off the main road, and you get back on the main road, and you just kind of do that. And even the side quests are really interesting and fun. And then you get all the way to Oscaruth, which is kind of the main hub of this area. And then as you progress, you find you start finding these like water with like blood, or at least it's like red. And you get up into the north area and you find a Gaunt Lord, and there's a settlement here of whites, and you battle in there and you find it, and you end up finding Radagast, who is the brown wizard, and Gandalf's partner in the Astari wizardry. So Radagast is a super big lore figure, and he helps you fight this corruption in Garth Garwin, and there's a big raid here. And to the south, you have the Harlog, which is like really infested with trolls, and they're like armored trolls, and they're really cool. So I love the quest flow of this zone. I love the landscape. It's almost like an African savanna kind of ruined area. It's really, really cool. It looks really neat. Crafting wise, this is an excellent zone for crafting. As you're going along this main road, you find all the crafting materials you would need for prospecting, forester, and because there's so many ruins, it's also a good zone for artifacts. So every character I've had, I've come through here for sure, and I've leveled up quite a bit of my crafting. Enemy variety, you get a ton of goblins in Minas Aeril. You get a lot of orcs in the Weathered Hills. And Nan Inen, you get half orcs, which is interesting. And then in this area, I can't remember what the name of this place is. Iverness. Yeah. Iverness. You get a lot of dour hands in Iverness. So you get that faction of evil dwarfs. In the Harlong, you get a lot of trolls, and over here you get a lot of ghosts. In this area, you get a lot of whites and corrupted Hjorns and all kinds of things. So this is like a really, really expansive amount of enemy variety in this zone. Really excellent. It's very interesting. So is this zone fun? Every time I go through this zone, I just really, really enjoy it. The zone is a blast. I like pretty much everything about this zone. So with all that being said, this zone gets an amazing rating. And I think I like this zone. It's right after Bree. I like this zone better than Dunland, for sure. Alright, the next zone is Lothlorien. So Lothlorien is interesting because the lore, I believe, it's like called the Golden Wood, and I believe the trees are so unique to Middle Earth is because they brought a seedling from Numenor, or it's either that or the Undying Lands. I can't remember. The tree is not native to Middle Earth, and so when they brought it here, Galadriel basically made a garden of these unique trees, because you can't find these trees anywhere else in Middle Earth. So this is very, very unique. Cool, really, really cool zone. Questing wise, you come out of Moria over here in the Dimmeril Dale. You travel through here, and you find Amdir. Is that his name, Amdir? The elf warden that's in the trees. You follow in the footsteps of the Fellowship. So the quest line is pretty cool. On this side, you come into here. When you get into Lothlorien, the quest line is kind of weird. They just kind of send you around Caris Galadrin, which is the capital. And you come up here to Siren Amroth, and you actually find the Fellowship here, is where you find them. And they're kind of resting. And then they kind of send you back to the south, and you're scouting. The quest line, you don't spend much time here at all. And I always get a little irritated by the quests in here, because you get all the way here, you've done all the stuff in Moria, and they send you back into Moria like 2 or 3 different times to deal with some of the corruption there. And this zone kind of feels like the bridge between Moria and Mirkwood, and it kind of felt rushed. So I'm not a fan of the questing in this area. The landscape is awesome. It's super well done. I love, this is such a unique forest, and Caris Galadrin is really, really cool looking. It's really hard to traverse. It almost has like a blood elf kind of aesthetic, like from World of Warcraft. Interesting. Crafting wise, it's decently populated with crafting material, more so on the foresting side, obviously, with it being a big giant forest. Enemy variety, there's basically no enemies in the actual forest. There's only orcs over here in the Demerald Dale area. Everything in the forest is just animals, and you're not really hunting any of them because they're not enemies. Fun wise, it is enjoyable to go through. Just as an experience, but it's not really a good questing area. So, all that to say, I think it's a middle of the road good or a low grade. I think it's a good zone. The next zone is the Morgul Vale. So the Morgul Vale was its own expansion later on in the Book of Mordor. So you come through this zone, through Gorgoroth, through Mordor, you come this way from the east, and you work your way to the west. So the lore of the zone is interesting. Minas Morgul was at one time an Arnorian city, like a sister city, a Gondorian city, to Minas Tirith over here, and Osgiliath was the original capital. So after the War of the Last Alliance, so it was Minas, I think it was Minas Arnor was what it was called, and Minas Tirith and had a different name, I can't remember, and then Osgiliath, and then over the years, Gondor just slowly declined, and so the Nazgul ended up taking over Minas Morgul and turning it into this dark fortress. So there's lots of interesting lore involved in all of that. So when you come into this, it's after the War of the Ring, Sauron is defeated and the Witch King is defeated, but there's still an orc settlement, and I believe Mothgog is kind of the lead protagonist in all of LOTRO. Kind of not necessarily a huge book character. I mean, he's mentioned, but he's not really elaborated on. But LOTRO really makes him the chief enemy as you're progressing. So the lore is really, really interesting. I enjoyed it, and you join up with Gandalf and Faramir because they are tasked with Aragorn to basically restore this area over time, and so that's kind of what your job is. And as you the Esteled land is like a big settlement, and there's a lot of, this was designed to be an end-game area, so there's a lot of cool end-game stuff in there. The questing was really cool. It looks like a really small zone, and if you're looking at it top down, it does look small, but this is all like mountains and hills. It's a very mountainous area, so it's way larger than it looks. The questing was pretty good. It wasn't really annoying. Like when they send you all the way up into these areas, you have a lot of things to do up there before you come back down. The questing in Minas Morgul was particularly fun because you like do a quest for the first circle, and then you come back and turn it in, and then you do a quest for the second circle. And I remember before I was going into this, I thought, man, I'm gonna have to come all the way back, go all the way back. Kind of like Minas Tirith questing, which can be pretty annoying. But I think LOTRO learned from the annoying questing of Minas Tirith because they implemented like a quick travel staircase where you can travel to the 6th floor or whatever. That was really nice. I really enjoyed that. So I think they kind of streamlined that. And then you do some Cirith Ungol questing up here to the north, which is, of course, like where Shelob is and all of that area. So landscape-wise, it's a very dreary, kind of shady, wizardry, dilapidated area, right? It's very dark, very grim. And it, kind of very much like Angmar, but this is like more present evil Angmar, right? So the zone had a really good aesthetic. You really felt like you were in this area. Did a good job. The crafting area, the crafting was really good. It was well populated. There was lots of stuff, especially up here in Cirith Ungol. there is a good hyper spawn for hinds. There's like a bunch of rams up in the mountain, and they spawn really, really fast, and there's like 30 of them. So I always farm ithel hides up here in the north. So crafting, this is a really good zone for crafting material. Enemy variety, tons of orcs and trolls in the actual city of Minas Morgul. Tons of spiders to the north. There's like a plague situation going on down here in the southern part of the zone. Other than that, just like lots of wildlife spread throughout. There was good enemy variety. It was fun. And then the last criteria, was it fun? I really enjoyed this zone. Faramir is one of my favorite characters, so it was fun to see him and kind of quest along with him. And of course, you go along with Gandalf in a lot of these areas. I'm trying to remember I think the protagonist was Gothmog here. I'm trying to remember, and I think you end up... No, it wasn't Gothmog. It was some higher up. Can't remember. You end up confronting him with rangers and stuff, and Gandalf, and you end up disposing of him. So that was really, really fun. So I think Minas Morgul, it's not... I wouldn't say it's an amazing... I think it is... I think it was a great zone. I think it was really enjoyable. There's nothing about it I really disliked. Alright, and the next zone is Mirkwood. So Mirkwood is kind of that... It was also an expansion. I think it was called the Siege of Mirkwood. It was like right after Lothlorien. Lothlorien kind of got overshadowed by Mirkwood, if I'm being honest. So you kind of zip through Lothlorien really quick, and then you kind of land on the beaches of Murky, which is kind of a cool thing in and of itself. So the lore of Mirkwood, Dol Guldur was the fortress of Sauron, like after the battle, after the last alliance, and he was here as the necromancer. There's a lot of going on here before the War of the Ring, like Sauron's building up his strength and kind of hiding off in this fortress. As you quest through this, it's very much like the Lone Lands. You start on the east side and you work your way to the west. So as you're working your way to the west, you'll get a bunch of quests, you'll hop off, you'll go do some things, and you'll get back. So I really was a fan of... I really liked the questing. Other than... there's an orc prisoner you have, Mazog. And as you're traveling, you're trying to get Mazog to Dol Guldur, because you're going to exchange Mazog for a dwarf that got captured in Moria. And it's like... I think there's 4, maybe 5 instance book quests where you have to like follow Mazog, like it's an escort kind of quest, and oh my goodness, those are really annoying. That's the only thing I don't like about this zone is the Mazog quest line. The questing, like other than that, the questing is great, but that's like the only thing I don't like is the main quest with the Mazog character. Landscape, it's very dark, very dreary, because it's like an evil forest. Yeah, nothing really special about that. Crafting wise, it's still the same. This is kind of weird. Moria, Lothlorien, and Mirkwood are all like the same tier of crafting. So if you've leveled up in Moria all your crafting, which I'm sure you have, you spent a ton of time in Moria, by the time you get to Lothlorien and Mirkwood, you're like, well, I don't need these materials anymore, right? Unless you are repping your guild reputation. So Mirkwood, I don't know, the crafting was kind of a miss for me. I was like, oh, I'm not going to go spend my time getting those materials because I've already leveled that up in Moria. Now, I think in the Ashen Slades, I think it does tier to the next level, but I didn't really get that far because I just kind of stayed on the main road and stayed with the main quest line. Enemy variety, there's tons of spiders in this zone. There's tons of orcs. There is some. You actually fight Nazgul at the end, which is pretty cool. The Scuttle Dells is like full of spiders. There's some ghosts in the Haunted Inn area. That's pretty cool. There is some lore there. I'm trying to remember. Oh, there's Marvel. They're like winged. I don't know how to explain it. They're like winged gargoyle kind of enemies. There's a lot of those in here. And then there's some settlements that were like overrun, and that's why there's ghosts here too. So was it fun? I actually loved this zone the first time I played through it. I'm playing through it a second time right now, so I'll be interested to see if I still like it then. I would put it in an amazing category because it was super immersive. The storyline was great, but I really hated the Mazog quest line, the instance things that because he'll just talk and you have to follow him, and it's like 15 minutes of that, and I really am not a fan of those kind of quests. So I think it definitely can't be amazing because of that. I think it has to be a low grade because of those quests that I really don't like. All right, the next zone is the Misty Mountains. So the Misty Mountains, there's some interesting lore in this area. This is the pass above Rivendell that the Bjornings guard to the Vales of Anduin. This is where you find Goblin Town, up here at the north area. I'm trying to remember where Goblin Town is now I think about it. Oh, it's up here. North High Pass. Yeah, where all these, like, the Black Crack. Yeah, that's where Goblin Town is. Goblin Town is terrible. It's so hard to navigate. It is a nightmare. And also you have Heligrod, which is a big old dwarf settlement that's been ruined because of dragons over time. So when you come up here, you go to Gloin's camp. And I'm trying to remember, I think when you get here as the player, the questing is really sparse and kind of weird. They like send you all the way up to Heligrod, you like plant a flag, and then you go over here, you plant a flag. I don't really know why. Can't remember. Do something with wargs in this zone. I don't know about the beginning or the middle quest line. All I remember is eventually it culminates in you go to Heligrod and you fight a Nazgul. And while you're fighting the Nazgul, he raises a dragon. And I thought that instance was like one of the coolest, most memorable things in the base game, level 1 to 50. So I have a kind of a nostalgic, fond memory of that quest, but I don't remember anything up until that point. Landscape, it's just a big frozen mountain, lots of traveling points. It's kind of sparse. There's not a lot going on. It's not really that interesting. It's just a lot of snow zone area. Crafting wise though, hands down, this is the best crafting zone in the game, because in the the giant halls right here in the south part, if you get to this travel point, you just travel south here. This is like the best hyper farm area of materials. You have tons of prospecting mining here, tons of foresting, tons of scholar, and there is actually a campsite here. So if you're a hunter, you can make that your camp, and you can travel here, and there's tons of mammoths and bears right here. So you can get hides, mining, prospecting, scholar. You can get everything here quickly. Like, it's super high spawn rate. So this is like, this and the troll shots are the two best, I think, hyperspawn areas in the entire game. Enemy variety. There's a lot of orcs in this zone. There's a lot of wargs, mostly goblins in Goblin Town. There is giants, and I think there were giants in this area, and there's giants down here, and lots of bears. The giants are kind of unique because they only appear at a couple other places, and this is kind of a dangerous area when you're in the giant area because they stun you, and they're pretty high level. So was this fun? The only fun thing I can think about is crafting, which is not everybody's cup of tea, like getting all the materials, but this is just such a good use of your time to craft in here. And then the major plot quest in Heligrod. I really didn't like Goblin Town. It was a mess. Super hard to traverse. So I think if I were rating this on crafting, I'd put it in amazing. If I was rating this on that nostalgia Heligrod, I would put it in good or great. But because of Goblin Town, I think it's like middle of the road for me. Because of the crafting, I put middle of the road. If I was not doing that, I'd put it in probably okay. Alright, the next zone is Mordor Besieged, and I don't really have a map of this because you have to like go to the area and it's kind of a pain. So this was after Mordor, they decided to revisit like the last alliance of men and elves and that whole battle sequence. So they kind of like a revisiting of Mordor. And it was interesting because you follow along with Elendil, his sons Anarion and Isildur, and the elf king is of the Woodland Realm. Thranduil is there, and Elrond is there. So there's lots of really cool lore ramifications that were really interesting, and you kind of quest from the east to the west as the host is moving towards sieging Barad-dûr. So I really liked all of that. The questing was good, as I remember. There's not super outstanding quests that really come to mind, so it was just kind of middle of the road. I enjoyed it. There's a lot of good lore involved. Landscape, it was a lot better than the Mordor in the War of the Ring time period. It was better landscaped. It had a lot better crafting as well. Enemy variety, there's just a ton of orcs there, a ton of trolls. There are a lot of these like kind of rhino beasts that are interesting. So I think I didn't like Mordor very much, but I liked Mordor Besieged a lot better. So I would put Mordor Besieged in okay. I thought it was fun. Nothing really super outstanding. The only thing really going for it was I thought just the cool lore of being at this really pivotal moment. I think we're going to move up to great because of the pivotal moment of the lore involved. Alright, the next zone is the Plateau of Gorgoroth. So this is kind of the zone around Orodruin and Mount Doom. So this was also an expansion, and I really liked the Battle of the Black Gate, and when you get into like Udun, I liked the beginning of this expansion, but when you got into it, I just liked it less and less. The lore of this is obviously huge. Like Mount Doom is where Sauron forged the One Ring. In the Battle of the Last Alliance, they besieged this whole area and Barad-dûr. Questing wise, you start from the Black Gate and you kind of work your way into the zone proper, and then you kind of work around to the north. And then you kind of work back around to the south. There is like it's kind of hard to traverse in terms of landscape. It's kind of a wasteland. There's like lots of lava and pits, and it all kind of looks the same. But I remember I got pretty confused. And even looking at it now, I don't really remember the places and what all we were doing. So the landscape is a mess. The questing was a mess because nothing really stood out to me. It was just kind of like, go here, do that, do this, do that. Again, this is after the War of the Ring and Sauron's defeated, so I think the point was Mordor was kind of in disarray. Landscape was meh. Crafting wise, I ended up, before I had the zone purchased, I came through here on a high level just to harvest crafting materials. Because you can actually do that. You can come in here to the zones that you haven't purchased and craft, get all the crafting materials, but not pay for the quest packs. And so I did that. So the crafting was pretty good. Later on, I ended up doing the quests when I purchased it later. Enemy variety, just tons of orcs, tons of trolls. In the south, I remember there were a lot of fire drakes, which I thought was cool, and like those fire spirits that you sometimes find. Those are pretty cool. Was it fun? It was more of kind of a nuisance, I'll be honest. Kind of an oppressive zone, and when I was here, I kind of felt like I'd really like to get through this so I can move on to the next questing area. So kind of a dud in terms of that. As opposed to like Minas Morgul, I was really interested in it. I didn't want to leave this zone till I was done. Didn't feel the same way about Mordor. Alright, the next zone is Moria, and I forgot I put the Plateau of Gorgoroth or Mordor and just okay. I was kind of neutral to it. Didn't really like it, didn't really like it. Alright, but Moria. Oh man, Moria is one of my favorite, if not the favorite, zone in the game. And I say zone, but it's it's like 7 subzones. Moria is just really, really cool. The lore of Moria is super vast. Like, this is where the dwarfs came and made their Khazad-dûm settlement, the biggest settlement they had made, and they found mithril, that rare mineral where they made, you know, all the armor and the axes and all the really cool stuff. And then when you come here as the player, you're following in the footsteps of the Fellowship, and you know, the dwarves are really thriving, and they uncover Durin's Bane, the Balrog of Morgoth, and he basically destroys the whole kingdom of Moria. So when you come in here, you come into the Great Delving, and immediately, it just, like, when you come in the entrance of Durin's Threshold, it immediately sets the tone for the whole expansion, and it is like the most immersive zone in Lord of the Rings Online. It is just phenomenal. And the questing is really, really cool. It like takes you into the Great Delving, and then it takes you to Silvertine Lodes, then you go up to the Durin's Way and the Crossroads, and you're like, the whole point of this expansion is you're helping the Iron Garrison, a faction of the dwarfs, retake this whole area. Then you like go down and you test the waterworks to see if the water is working, and then you get to the 21st Hall, which is like the mainest settlement hub of the area. You know, then you just go all over. The questing is just excellent. It's not like sending you. It is a little bit of sending back, but it's like it feels all relevant and important. It doesn't feel like a chore. And every subzone like this, the Flaming Deeps is full of like ironworks and flaming, and the Red Horn Lodes is like they're harvesting all the iron from this area. Foundations of Stone is super creepy. And right here you find the bridge shard of Khazad-dûm that Gandalf broke when his battle with the Balrog. In the 21st Hall you find the Chamber of Mazarbul, which Balin, one of the dwarfs in The Hobbit, comes here to resettle, and he ends up getting killed, and that's his tomb. And that's that famous scene in the Fellowship of the Ring fight scene in the movie that happens in the Chamber of Mazarbul. Then right here, the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, when Gandalf breaks it. You can just go on and on and on about Moria, and the lore and the landscape is just amazing, like top notch, 10 out of 10. I love the second hall. It's like this giant hall full of stone trees. Crafting of Moria, especially in the second hall, I remember, is just super, super well populated. Every zone, there's stuff to gather and stuff to do. Oh, also, Zurak Ziggle is the highest point of the Misty Mountains, and you can find the body of the Balrog here, which is like the most epic thing ever. And then another cool right here is the Endless Stair. And a really cool thing is you find the Endless Stair there, and then here, and then through 3 or 4 of the zones you can find the Endless Stair, which is like a landscaping thing. So lore, it's a top tier. Questing, it's top tier. Landscape, it's like the most immersive MMO zone I've ever played through. Crafting is really good. Enemy variety, there's so much enemy variety in this zone. Lots of orcs, lots of goblins. In Durin's Way, you fight the Marvin, which are like those winged, kind of bat-like enemies. Lots of wargs. Lots of trolls. And the Foundations of Stone, you fight the nameless things that like Gandalf talks about. So these really creepy, like Lovecraftian kind of things. There's also like some kind of fungal disease happening in this area. And then my last criteria, is it fun? I love going to Moria. Like, I always want to get my character to Moria, and then Moria feels like the end game, and it's only the second expansion in the game. Also, I forgot to mention at the beginning of Moria, in the Walls of Moria, you fight the Watcher in the Water here, and you unlock a legendary weapon. And the legendary weapon, I think, is one of my favorite additions to the game, and you get it right at the beginning of Moria. So just love this zone. So Moria, I think Moria is my all-time favorite. Yeah, I think it's my all-time favorite. Maybe a little bit below Breland, maybe a little bit below Lone Lands. But it's definitely an amazing zone. It's phenomenal. There's so much variety in it. It's an excellent zone. All right, our next zone is the North Downs, and this is another one of my favorite zones. So the lore of the North Downs is mostly revolving around that faction of Arnor being Arthedain, and Fornost up here in the north of the zone was the capital, and it was ransacked and destroyed by Angmar. And Angmar is actually right north of this zone, so it makes a lot of sense. So when you come into this zone, you come up from Breland and you come into Trestlebridge, which is a really cool little area in and of itself. Very unique bridge in Lord of the Rings Online. And there's a lot of orc infiltration and orc attacks. You help Trestlebridge fight them off. Then you get into here in the fields of Fornost. And the questing is pretty good. And then Watharan is full of orcs. And then the fields of Fornost is full of whites, and so you do some stuff there, and then you kind of travel into the Eriador and the Kingsfells. And when you get into the Kingsfell and Estilidine, the Ranger settlement, which is a really major faction and settlement in the base game, level 1 to 150, you kind of go back out and they send you to the north, which is a dwarf settlement, or to the south, and I think you do both actually, in an elf settlement. So you get all the races pretty much in the zone other than the hobbits. And you do a lot of quests there, and there's a ruin of elf ruins down here to the south, and then as you progress further, you get into some higher mobs. There's some Earthkin in this zone, which is a really interesting kind of giant NPC. A whole clan. There's like a friendly clan and there's an evil clan, and you kind of help the friendly clan. And then down here in Dol Dinin is just like infested with trolls. So the questing is really good. You start in Trestlebridge and you kind of make your way all the way up here, and then I think eventually you do come back to Fornost, because Fornost was a big raiding instance back in the day. Landscape-wise, it's very desolate because of the whole Fornost situation. Right here in the Kingsfell, it's a lot prettier, more restored, but the whole place is pretty overrun by orcs, and it really sets the stage for the ominous Angmar invasion. You really feel like this zone is being slowly invaded by evil forces. So landscape is great. Its travelability, it just takes a long time because it's a big zone, but it's not annoying to travel in this zone. It's okay. Crafting wise, it's not the best for crafting materials in the whole western part of the zone. Once you cross this river in Eriador, it gets a lot better. And right outside of Estilidine, if you travel west, right around the Kingsfell where you see like the cows in this farm area, this is a really good place to harvest hides and prospecting. And I come here quite often when I need to level up somebody's crafting in that tier list. So crafting, it's a great zone. Enemy variety, like I was saying, you get orcs in the south, you get whites in the Fornost area, you get lots of trolls in Dol Dinin, you get Earthkin over here in the far east of the zone, and you get some Angmarians too, as kind of the footsteps of Angmar. So enemy variety is excellent, and is this zone fun? I really enjoy this zone. Similar to the Lone Lands, I always kind of want to come here. Unfortunately, it's a little bit weird in the level area, because it starts off at like 22 and it gets up to like 34ish or something like that. So I always find there's some sweet spot where you go to Lone Lands and quest a little bit, and then you come here and quest a little bit, and then you go back to Lone Lands and quest. But I have never been able to quite figure that out. Lone Lands, you just kind of get on that road and you quest. This zone, it feels a little bit more disjointed, and so I think this is a great zone. Maybe even an amazing zone, because the story is good, there's so much lore, all the reasons I just judged it, but it's definitely not as good as the Lone Lands, I think. It's either a low amazing or a high great. I think it's a high grade. I don't think it's quite an amazing because of it's just hard to quest in this area. So the next zone is North Ithilien. North Ithilien was introduced in the after battle. So this would be after the Battle of Pelennor Fields. The Witch King is defeated, and then Aragorn sits out with the host of the West, and you come across Osgiliath. And we've already seen, at this point in your playthrough, you've already seen South Ithilien, which is like Faramir and the Rangers. Now you're heading to North Ithilien, and you, yeah. So North Ithilien, you're just kind of going, the lore of this zone is it's similar to South Ithilien. It was just a remnant of Gondor. It's been kind of overtaken, kind of deserted by just the years of war. When the player gets to this point, you're kind of a scouting party for Aragorn's host, and you're just traveling ahead and scouting out to make sure it's safe and all those kind of areas. The quest was kind of, it was alright. It wasn't annoying, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't like really outstanding and great. Landscape-wise, the zone is very, very pretty. It's very interesting that it's right before Mordor, and it's just like, it seems almost untouched by the taint of Mordor, other than it's just kind of desolate. And Heneth Ennen, that's the Forbidden Pool where Faramir almost kills Smeagol, but Frodo ends up intervening and sparing Smeagol. That's all in this area. So there's an interesting lore thing here. There's a lot of cool ruins in the landscape. Crafting-wise, it is... I remember my Scholar leveled up right about in the middle of the zone. There's a dilapidated castle area. And there's a really good area to farm artifacts. So crafting gets a high rating. Enemy variety, it's just orcs, and there's not many of them. And I remember there were several quests coming through here where you're supposed to kill this set amount of enemies, and it was actually really hard to find enemies in this zone. So I think enemy variety gets kind of a low rating, unfortunately, in this zone. And then fun. It wasn't fun, but it wasn't like a chore. It was just kind of neutral to me. So I think all that being said, it was good. You know, it was kind of middle of the road. I didn't dislike things about it, but I didn't really like a whole lot of things about it either. All right, the next zone, Cirith Cabra, I actually have not quested in. This must be Umbar or Legacy of Morgoth. I haven't gotten there yet. Believe it or not, I still haven't gotten to max level. Alright, so the next zone is Swanfleet. Now, Swanfleet was introduced before the Shadow expansion along with Cardolan. Those are the two introduced. Swanfleet is very unique in that it's an additional starter zone. So if you don't want to start in the Dwarf, Elf, Hobbit, or Man area, you can actually choose to start in Mossward down here in the left corner. And this is my preferred way to start new characters in the more modern LOTRO because the quest line is a lot more streamlined. So the lore of this zone, it's right south of Rhovanion, and so there's lots of elf ruins of the elf smiths that helped make the Rings of Power. And so you, the player, when you come into this area, Mossward's a little settlement down here. And there's nothing really stand-outish in the quest. You're just kind of going around helping the locals until you get into up here in the north in Caras Celeborn. You start helping a ranger, and you come across an elf. And there's a really cool instance when you get up here in the north of the zone where you see Sauron in his fair gaze when he deceived the elves. And there's a really cool epic quest line there where you get to see Sauron, and then you end up seeing him forging the One Ring in Barad-dûr. So I really like that. Quest is pretty cool in that regard. Landscape, this zone is actually really pretty. There's a lot of good variety. This whole swampy area is pretty neat in that you can travel all through here mounted, and it doesn't dismount you. Sometimes when you're in like a swamp area or water, it dismounts you, and it's really hard to traverse. That's not the case in this zone. They did a good job with that. Down here in the south, in Clegir and Glen Helvig, these are Hobbit settlements, and it's very mountainous in here, in Lentrev. So that's really cool. There's an interesting quest where you have to go explore the waterfalls. Can be annoying at times, but it is very visually pleasing. It's not a super big pain to traverse this area. You just kind of have to kind of pay attention to the roads. Crafting wise, this is a significantly better area to craft your tier 1 and tier 2 items than Eriador or the Shire, and maybe even Breland. Because all my characters that have come through here don't struggle to find material. So I think I rate this one higher than the other starting zones because it just seems more populated with crafting materials. Enemy variety, you get a lot of orcs kind of in the Tharbad area. You get a lot of... They're not crocodilis, but they're those basilisk things. I forget what they're called. You get a lot of those in the swamp. In the Old South Road, you actually get a whole settlement of Uruk-hai. And that reminds me, one of the main quests in Mossward, it gets attacked by Uruk-hai. And it kind of sets the stage where you find a band of Uruk-hai all dead, and there's a sword, and then it leads you into Tharbad, which you find Boromir, because Boromir traveled the Greenway from Enedwaith, this very road, and it kind of sets the stage for the Cardinal quest lines. In Caris Gravelin, there's also a lot of orcs and Uruk-hai, and then further south, or further north, there's a big warg settlement, and there's some horns, the corrupted trees, and the forest trolls up in this area too. So enemy variety is pretty good. There's a lot of wolves in this area as well. So the last category is fun. Is it fun to play in? It's okay. It's not the best questing experience, not the best the game has to offer, but it's not bad. It's not like something you don't want to be in. At least I don't. But I will say I want to quest out of it. So I think it's middle of the road, good. I don't feel strongly about it. All right, the next zone is the Great River. And so the Great River is right after you come out of Lothlorien and Mirkwood. And I believe the way you get here is you go over to Dunland and Enedwaith over there first, and then you come back over here, because this is where the Rohan expansion kind of kicks off. So the lore of the Great River is a lot about the Brownlands, and the Brownlands are when the last alliance of men, the giant army, was heading toward Mordor. The Brownlands used to be the Garden of the Entwifes, and Sauron burned it, and therefore it's like a desolate brown ashland called the Brownlands. So that's kind of interesting going on in this zone. When you come down here as the player, you come from Lothlorien, and you're tracking the Fellowship as they were in their boats going down the Anduin. So you're kind of following along behind them, finding their trail and track. And that's kind of the theme of all of technically Eastern Rohan. And Stangard, you kind of get introduced, and that's your first settlement of the Rohirrim, and it's really, really neat. This area is really pretty. There's some good ruins in this area as well. Questing wise, all I remember is you start in the north and you kind of travel down the paths of the Fellowship, and I remember I quested quite a bit in the Brownlands, and that was really enjoyable. Landscape, it's pretty. It has Lothlorien vibes at the beginning of the zone, and then it transitions into what you will be familiar with in Rohan. So it kind of sets the stage really well in that area. There's a nice little bog area, and then the Brownlands. So lots of good biome differences, and of course there's lots of rivers being right here in the Anduin. Crafting wise, it is the next tier, so it was an important zone for me when I came through here, because I had already leveled up the tier in Mirkwood and Dunland and Enedwaith. But I don't remember it being an outstandingly good place to farm anything, so I think it's like middle of the road on crafting. Enemy variety, there's some like orcs in the north of the woods. There's some wargs kind of out in the field, I remember. And there's a ton of Haradrim and trolls. And there's actually a lot of trolls that are turned to stone in the Brownlands, if I remember correctly. So enemy variety, there was... In the Limelight Gorge, I feel like there was some kind of corrupted forest. But I can't quite remember that. There was something interesting over here that was a unique enemy. So probably enemy variety gets about a medium. And the last criteria, was it fun? I really enjoyed my first kind of look into the Rohirrim architecture and society. So I thought this zone was really fun. I think this, I have a fond memory of this zone. So, but there's nothing like super stand out about it, but it is a good zone. I think it's a low grade for me. All right, the next quest is the Shire, and this might be an unpopular opinion. I'm not a huge fan of the Shire, to be honest with you. So the lore of the zone is that it used to be like the hunting grounds of the royal family, like the King of Arnor, and eventually it was kind of given to hobbits, and they settled here, and then, I think it's like 1,000 years go by, and the hobbits have become really just kind of inclusive. They don't travel much. Nobody really comes in here. So that's kind of where we get to the Hobbit in the story of the books, in which we know. It's very, very pretty. It's very like delightful, I guess the word I would use. There's the reason I don't like it is, I guess the questing is the next criteria. All the quests are like, take this mail to this person, take this, shipment of food, eggs, whatever, to this person, chase the chicken. It just seems kind of mediocre. Like, why am I doing this? Now, that could be why some people really like this zone, is it's just like very heartwarming. There's not anything pressing in this zone. There's a little bit of goblin encroachment. Landscape, it's really pretty. It's all farmland. They're just growing. In real life, I love gardening, so I like that aspect of it. Crafting wise, it is pretty good for finding tier 1 crafting material. But it's not better than like Swanfleet or Breeland. It's better than Ered Luin, I'd say. And just finding material. Enemy variety, there's just not a lot of enemies here. It's it's like bugs in the marsh area. A little bit of goblins and some like wolves. So it's just, I don't know. And then like fun is the last criteria. And I'm sorry, I've tried to quest in the Shire a couple different times, and I just get so bored. And I don't know if it's something about it's just not clicking with me. But I'm like, I don't want to do that. That sounds like a boring quest, and I skip it, and then I'm just like, I'm just gonna go to Breeland. So that might be a really unpopular opinion. I do not like the Shire. If we were ranking it on landscape, it'd be like a good or great zone. I just don't like it. Sorry if that makes people mad. It just, I don't know. Of all the criteria, it's not fun. The questing it just doesn't seem important. And that might be the point of the Shire, is it's not been tainted by the evils of Middle Earth, and so it's like it's a normie zone, right? So that's, you kind of have to have that for the rest of the world to feel oppressed by Sauron's forces, right? So I think it's a necessary zone. Just me as a player, I don't want to quest there. I'll put the Shire at the top of okay, now that I think about it. Okay, the next quest is the Wastes. Now, the Wastes is the zone that you play through right before the Battle of the Black Gate. So as the name would suggest, it's just a wasteland. It's very volcanic. There's nothing going on here. Right above this, you can kind of see this marshy area. That's actually the Dead Marshes. So kind of in line with the Dead Marshes. Similar vibe. It's just very barren. There's nothing going on here. It feels like it takes forever to travel. Lore-wise, I don't personally know of a whole lot other than Gondor at one point built the defensive fortresses in this area to kind of keep a watch over Mordor. And over the long years, the waning years, excuse me, Gondor just kind of lost control. So there's Gondorian ruins. That's about all I know of the background lore. The lore is you, the player, you get here with the host of Aragorn, and you kind of make your way up here, and then eventually you play the epic battle of the Battle of the Black Gate, which I thought the Battle of the Black Gate was really, really good, really, really enjoyable and fun, really a good, faithful recreation of what's in the books. So, the landscape, it's supposed to be very oppressive and dark, and it does well in that area. When you get to the Black Gate, it's just very menacing. And you have Narcost and Carhost are like these giant towers of the Black Gate. So, questing, I give it me. It gets a little bit higher rating for the epic battle. Landscape, it's just nothing, you know, it's kind of icky. I think right here, it's called the Slag Hills, and it just looks like, you know, that trash monster in Star Wars from the Death Star? It kind of looks like that. It's just like, this is gross. Crafting-wise, it gets a really bad rating for me in crafting, because I don't know if I'm not understanding something, but when I get to this zone, and I start crafting the materials that you find out in the landscape, they're not on the tiers. It's like its own area to craft. It must have been some additional game currency. I think it's called like Mordor iron or something. I don't know. There's just and then there's you harvest like wood that's not you. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it other than the crafting really sucks in this zone. It's like it's a really bad rating for me in the crafting department. And then enemy variety. There's a lot of bears in the landscape. There's some Haradrim in these settlements to the north. And the rest of it is just orcs and trolls. So, as you would expect, you know, the enemies to be right on the doorstep of Mordor. And then fun. The only fun thing about this zone is the epic story. Everything else is kind of a drag. And it's one of those zones that really suffers from, you want to get through this as quickly as possible to get into Mordor, right? So you never really spend much time here, at least I didn't. So, I don't think it's a good zone. I think it kind of stinks. Maybe if I was really judging the epic battle, I'd put it in okay, like a low okay, but I think putting all the things together, I don't like this zone. Okay, the Troll Shaws. So the Troll Shaws are the zone that you come into right after the Lone Lands, and this is the zone that houses Rivendell. So the lore of this zone was, it pretty much revolves around Rivendell being the last homely house in Ladris. Rivendell being a super important settlement in the Second and Third Age. So there's a lot of like lore in that. When Sauron waged war against the elves, he came into here and like besieged Rivendell, all that kind of stuff. It is on the footsteps of Rhovanion and Moria, so it's all kind of right packed in this area. Also, the lore in this zone when Bilbo and the dwarves come through here, this is the zone where the trolls capture them and Gandalf turns them to stone with the sunlight. And you can actually find the trolls in this area, so that's a really cool lore aspect. So later on in this zone, they added the Angle of Methathel, which gets right into the Swanfleet territory, and so that was a whole nother like subcategory zone. And I'm trying to remember, I think it's like 45. It's actually parallel to the quest level as Wildwood in Breeland. And I have not quested in Wildwood, but I have quested in the Angle of Methathel. And that was fun. It was nothing super important or lore breaking, but it was just kind of like a story of like an elf friend and a farmer friend. So that was interesting. Quest-wise, I'm trying to remember, you do a lot with Elladan and Elrohir. When the Nazgul pursued Frodo over the Rhovanion, which is this river here, and they got swept away in the books, you, the player, kind of come into this point where you're looking for the riders and you find a horse dead but not a rider. And so you're kind of running around in the zone trying to find that Nazgul, and you end up finding him in the north. You go with Legolas. And you end up going to the north and you find him and he's trying to like rouse up the forest trolls in the north of the zone. That's pretty much the questing that goes on here. Landscape, it's really pretty. It's a lot of really thick pine trees, very wooded, very unsettled. So that's really cool. Rivendell is probably one of the prettiest zones. in the game. If you've never been there, you should. It's awesome. So it gets a high rating for Rivendell. Crafting. This is one of the best areas to craft because of the high moor and giant valley. So there's actually a campsite up here, and if you're a hunter, you can make that your campsite travel point, and it is just jam-packed full of all the crafting material of this tier. So it's Scholar, Prospector, Forester, and Tailor. So it gets a super high rating. There's only probably one other zone that gets a higher rating than this one for crafting. I always come back here to gather materials. Enemy variety, obviously the troll shaws. There's a lot of trolls in this area, especially in the north. There's a lot of forest trolls, wood trolls. I think there's like a mountain troll cave. There's a lot of caves that have a lot of trolls, essentially. Trying to remember, the angle of my Thythal has a big concentration of wargs, and there's actually a Tornbat. I remember that's a ranger settlement down there. So there's a lot of orcs and wargs down there. There's like forest trolls and just kind of deer, and up in the high moor in the giant valley there's a giant area, and there are some drakes. There's some drakes up in this area too. So enemy variety is pretty good. It's not the best, but it's pretty good. And is the zone fun? Unfortunately, the zone is really hard to traverse, and it makes the zone kind of unfun. Like, I remember there's a quest that sends you up here to investigate, and you have to, like, go... It's so hard to figure out how to get to places in this zone. Even, like, playing through it 6 or 7 times, I'm like, where am I supposed to go? So, unfortunately, that's a big hindrance for me in the fun category. I think it's the middle of the road. Not great, not bad. It's about there, I'd say. Alright, the next zone, Cape of Umbar, I have not quested in as of this video, so that's going to go in the not quested in. Haven't done the expansion of Umbar or Legacy of Morgoth. Alright, East Rohan is our next region. So East Rohan, this is another one of those like confusing, they kind of lumped like 6 zones into one category. So East Rohan refers to the Wold, Norcroft's, the East Wall, Sutcroft's, Antwash, Vales, and Wildemore. Okay, so when you come out of the Great River, you just kind of travel south. Overall, the questing, you're just kind of traveling down this way into the footsteps of the Fellowship, and the East Wall has the Argonauts, which are those giant statues with their hands up. And right here is where the Fellowship landed, and Boromir tried to take the ring from Frodo. Boromir gets killed by the Uruk-hai, and Amon Hen is where Frodo puts the ring on, sees, like the vision of Sauron, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of really significant lore that happens here. There's a big battle at Amon Hen. So the world has Harwick, and we're going to talk about the questing. So Harwick introduces the mounted combat war steed system that they brought into the game in the Rohan expansion. I think it's called Siege of Isengard or something like that. I can't remember. I wasn't around. I wasn't playing this when that came out. I do not like the mounted combat at all. I just not a fan of it. So that might get a bad rating in this area. Questing wise, I don't remember other than this, the Wold Zone in particular had the mounted combat, and I just did not like that. When you get down here to the Floodwind, the questing picked up for me, and I liked it more when you get into the East Wall, because it's all like related to the Fellowship. When you get done questing here, it sends you off into the Norcrofts, very wide open area, and then the Sutcrofts is kind of the same thing, if I remember correctly. Questing was kind of I don't remember what was going on. There's a pattern with Rohan where you go to a settlement and you quest there for like maybe 10-15 minutes, and then it sends you on somewhere else, and so it's pretty forgetful. unfortunately. The Entwash Vale, it's like the beginning of Fangorn. There were some cool quests going on there. And I believe this Eatworth place had been burned. So that was kind of interesting. Now, Wildermore was added, like, later on in the game. So I have quested... Wildermore is the highlight of East Rohan for sure. I think the zones that are really stand out are the East Wall and Wildermore. Wildermore is really unique. Frozen wasteland at the top. This really cool, almost Viking-like settlement in Forlaw. It has... just the landscape is wonderful in this area. And all of East Rohan, I would say the landscape is quite nice. Music is excellent, actually, in this zone. The storyline is really interesting here. You get like an ice, you get a frost. Oh, not a wraith. I guess it'd be a wraith, and he's kind of tormenting the zone. So the quest line is pretty interesting. Enemy variety, get lots of wargs in all these areas. Lots of Uruk-hai. Good variety of enemies. There's a lot of mounted combat, which I'm not a fan of. Like, you'll have goblins and orcs on wargs. Especially if you're a melee class and you're trying to fight on a war steed. Oh my goodness, it's annoying. If you're a range class, you can just kind of nuke things down, which makes it a lot better. So, and then the fun category. I did enjoy playing through this area. I thought it was quite fun. Especially Eastwall and Wildermore. And then I really enjoyed when I got into the Fangorn area. And I can't remember if Fangorn is in this area. I think that might be West Gondor. Can't remember quite offhand. So that was a long explanation. Sorry, but there's a lot of zones in that. I think East Rohan. I think it's a high grade. Maybe not quite as good as North Downs. I think it's not quite as good as North Downs. Well, there's a lot of epic stuff happening here, though. I think it's better than North Downs, I'll be honest. The only thing I don't like is mounted combat. It's the only thing I don't like about this zone. If it didn't have mounted combat, it'd be amazing for me. But because of mounted combat, I don't like it. Luckily, mounted combat, for the most part, not in the Rohan zones, but for the most part in the game, you can just kind of ignore it, and it's not a big deal. But in Rohan, you kind of have to get involved in mounted combat, unfortunately. All right, the Vales of Anduin. So the Vales of Anduin is a higher level zone. The lore of this area is quite extensive. You have up here, you have Bjorngus, which is Bjorn's house. So obviously where the dwarfs and Bilbo's company come out and find refuge in the house of Bjorn. You have the Eagle Eyrie in this area. Right here in Roscabel, that is actually the settlement of Radagast the Brown. So that's quite interesting. And the Gladden Fields, after Sauron is defeated, Isildur takes the One Ring, and the Gladden Fields is called the Disaster of the Gladden Fields. This is where his whole company is ambushed and Isildur is killed. So when you, the player, come into this zone, all that's kind of there. Like, there's a ton of lore involved in this area. Like, the goblins are coming from Goblin Town, and you're, like, tasked with trying to eliminate them. You start questing along with the Bjornings. This is kind of the whole pass that they keep safe for travel. And there's a really awesome quest where Elrond comes into the picture and visits you here, and then you end up finding the Shade of Isildur. And you and Gandalf and Elrond question him, and there's a very enjoyable quest line. I love the quests in Vales of Anduin, and it really set the stage for the Minas Morgul expansion. Landscape. This is a really pretty zone. The Anduin is just a cool river. There's a lot going on here. Traversing can be a little bit annoying because the river's so wide and deep, it'll dismount you. So there's only a few places you can cross. I remember at Helvetis, which is a Bjorning settlement, you got to do a lot of quests right here in this little island area, and there was a lot of goblins and stuff, and it was hard to get up to that point. I found that kind of annoying. And then you do quests down here. I think this is some kind of dwarf. I can't remember. This is some kind of evil fortress, and it was hard to get there as well. So not quite as high rating in the just navigation. Crafting wise, it was excellent. I remember I traveled up and down this road north and south a few times to get my crafting up to snuff, and that was really helpful and nice. Enemy variety, there's a ton of goblins in this area. There's a ton of wargs. Down here in the Gladden Fields, there's a lot of wights and spirits and ghosts. So that was kind of interesting. Was this zone fun? I thought the zone was really fun, actually. I thought it was quite enjoyable. So I'm going to put Vales of Anduin in great. It was a really good zone. It was enjoyable. Not quite amazing, just because I thought traversing was a little bit on the annoying side. All right, Angmar. So Angmar was the end game of the original game. So like level 1 to 50. The base game when it released, Angmar was the end game. So the lore that's happening in this zone is obviously the Witch King settled in this area in his fortress of Carn-Dûm. And he waged war on the whole kingdom of Arnor. So the Angmar is like pivotal in the whole story of Eriador and the fate of Arnor. So yeah, there's so much that goes on here. It's like besieged several times in the history of Middle-earth. When you, the player, get here, you come up from the Ramduith out of the North Downs. And you find, I remember there's the Rangers of Astildine send you up here because they like sent a scouting party essentially. So you're doing a lot with the Rangers in this zone. And you come up here to Ughair, and there's like there's a friendly tribe of Angmarians in this zone. Questing, you start in the bottom left-hand corner and you kind of work your way. You go up a little bit, and you come back, and then you work towards the east. And there's an interesting thing that I'm not sure happens in any other zone in the game. When you get into Malinhead, there's these watching statues that if you can't pass, they'll kill you. So you actually have to progress the main quest. And I didn't find that out until, like, I skipped Angmar and went to Moria on a couple characters, and then I had to come to Angmar for some reason, I can't remember, and I couldn't get past these statues, so I had to pay a Mithril coin to get up to Gathfornar. So that's kind of a weird, just a weird thing about it. Landscape-wise, it's just very, like, toxic. You know, there's just, like, pools of ick everywhere, very desolate, gloomy. The skybox is really gross. And it's meant to be an oppressive zone, but it's just not something you want to stay here a really long time, unfortunately. I think it's, you know, but it was also the end game zone, so it's kind of designed to keep you here a long time. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Crafting wise, I thought it was okay in crafting, but because it's like the base game, it's just not as populated with materials that you need, and so you'll spend a lot of time just running around looking for stuff. It's just not the best. It's better to go to Forge Shell if you're going to harvest material, and better yet, it's better to go to Eregion if you're going to harvest crafting. So if I'm focused on a character that's a crafting character, I don't even come to Angmar, unfortunately. Enemy variety. There is a lot of wargs, there's a lot of orcs. Up here in the left part of the zone, there's a bunch of drakes. And over here at Mathad, there's a bunch of drakes over here as well. So drakes are always kind of cool when you get to fight them. There's a lot of Rudour tribes in the Falrod. Right here in the middle, Imlad Balcorth. It's kind of the Barrow Downs. It's just a big old burial site with tons of wights. Lots of spiders in this zone as well. So there is really good variety of enemies. In fact, it's all enemies, so that probably gets a really good rating on that regard. And then fun. Is it fun? Not really. It's not really a fun zone to play through. It's, I don't know. It probably would have been a lot better back in the day if this was the end zone, right? The end game. But because of where LOTRO is right now, it just feels like whenever I'm here, I'm like, man, I wish I could be in Eregion. Does that make sense? Like, whenever I'm in Angmar, I'm like, well, I could spend all my time getting the main quest so I can pass this dead zone area. Or I could just skip all of this and go to Eregion and get into Moria, and that's what I prefer. So, because of that, you know, I don't want to judge it too harshly because I think it would have been a good end game zone. I just think it's okay. And I kind of don't want to quest here. Okay, so the Yonder I haven't actually quested in. I've run through here, but I haven't quested here. I've quested in the Shire. So I'm not going to judge it. I don't think it's fair to me to say anything about it. From what I understand, and I watched someone else play through it, it seems like basically the Shire 2.0. So I would probably, because I don't like the Shire very much, I'd probably put it in that area, but I'm just going to put it in haven't quested in. The Angle of Methathel. Oh, I thought this was incorporated with the Trollshaws. I kind of talked about this one already. It was alright. It's not as good as the Trollshaws, I will say. Trollshaws is a much significantly better. Angle of Methathel, similar biome to Trollshaws. And the quest was like, yeah, you're just kind of helping an elf, and he's trying to like befriend this group. It was like a nice quest, but it's not something I'm probably going to go back and do. Enanul Bazaar. This is the battle of the dwarfs and orcs, and I haven't played this one either. And I always, every time I get in the game, I just do something else and I forget this actually exists. So I don't want to judge that too harshly. I know it's on the doorsteps of the Dimmerald Dale. So in between Lothlorien and Moria. I know where it takes place, like in the lore, but I just haven't played that. Alright, so the King's Gondor. So King's Gondor is an expansion that's kind of setting up the stage for the Umbar expansion, and that's currently of this video where I'm playing my max character, my highest level character. And King's Gondor is when Aragorn has taken the name Elisar, Sauron has been defeated, and Aragorn or Elisar is starting to go back through his kingdom in Gondor and restoring things, helping it rebuild, giving his people what he wants, eliminating any threats, right? So I have really, really enjoyed King's Gondor. When you come through Gondor the first time, you come from like the Pass of the Dead in Lemmadon, you come from the west and you work your way east to Minas Tirith, right? In King's Gondor, you work your way the complete opposite. You work from Minas Tirith from the west, and you go to the east. And Gondor is beautiful. Like, they did a really great job. So questing-wise... Okay, sorry, lore. I skipped. Lore is what you expect with Gondor. This is just... you know, the War of the Ring happens all in this area, right? So as you, the player, come in, it's the aftermath of all that. So you're helping all the locals, dealing with any kind of remnants of threats. There's a lot of Corsairs still around. The questing was pretty good. It kind of keeps you going. It keeps you going. There's a lot of territory to cover, and so I really enjoyed all of that. Landscape is just beautiful. This is probably my favorite of like the landscapes that were really enjoyable to be in. The music is really good. So many times I'm playing through here and I stop and I take a screenshot. So I love the landscape of King's Gondor. Crafting wise, it's been really good for gathering material for my crafting characters. It's just like everywhere, you know, I'll go do this quest. There's tons of things I'll pick up along the way. And that's the kind of crafting I like. Like while I'm doing a book quest, I want to find stuff along the way. I don't want to have to like come back and farm it. So high rating for me in the crafting area. Enemy variety gets a little bit of a lower rating. There's just not a lot going on in terms of enemy. It's more story driven in King's Gondor, which makes sense because Sauron was defeated. So I don't think you can judge it too harshly for that. It's trying to be true to the lore and what's happening in the game. And then fun, was it fun? I think it was like middle of the road fun. It's nothing epic going on. So if you're looking for like epic battles or like big drawn out battles, this is probably not going to be fun to you either. So all that to say though, I think the King's Gondor, I think I liked it better than the War of the Ring Gondor, when everything's being burned and it's kind of a mess. Alright, the Umbar, I can't even read what this is. I haven't quested in this area, in the Vale of Ikerborth. That must be a Legacy of Morgul. I haven't quested in this area, I haven't gotten there yet. Evendim. Evendim is one of my favorite, if not the all-time favorite zone for me. So the lore of Evendim is quite fascinating. You have a Numinos, which was the capital of Elendil when he was king over Arnor before its fall. And Anumos is just this really cool area, kind of like a Dol Amroth. But because Numenor was so revolved around like maritime and ships and everything, Evendim has a really cool aesthetic. So when you, the player, come here, you're sent here to you have the shards of the sword that was broken, but you're sent here to find some hidden lore in Numenos and to be able to find a rare metal so that the smiths in Rivendell can reforge Anduil, Aragorn's sword. So it's just super epic quest. I love the questing and the lore in this zone. Landscape, it's probably one of the prettiest, probably one of my favorite zones in the landscape. It's just such a cool zone to be in because this lake is just massive, and Lord of the Rings Online's water graphics are really, really cool. And there's this really cool giant statue, almost like a Statue of Liberty-esque kind of thing in the middle of the zone. So the landscape is great. Sometimes if you were going to traverse the lake, you have to swim a lot, which can be kind of frustrating, but they even have a boat system. It's kind of like Stable Masters, but it's boat related. So as you go through here, you'll find the boat swift travels, and I thought that was awesome. I'd love to see that in other zones. Maybe it is in other zones, but I haven't really come across that. So I loved the boat aspect. Crafting wise, this is one of my go-to spots to farm. Up here in the north in Ostfarad, kind of to the east of there's a big bear encampment, which is excellent for hides. To the north of Ostfarad is excellent for prospecting, and because there are so many ruins in here, this is a great place to find artifacts for a scholar. So crafting gets a super high rating. Enemy variety, you get a lot of... Well, I didn't even mention there's a whole hobbit area down here to the south in Oathbarton. Not my cup of tea. You do a lot of Shire-ish kind of quests. I don't really like that, so I'm not going to judge that too harshly. Not my cup of tea. Enemy variety, you get a lot of grave robbers. There's a lot of brigands and stuff grave robbing all the settlements, which is quite fascinating. A lot of orcs in Numenos. There is like a tribe of orcs that dress themselves in wolves, and there's a giant settlement up here to the north as well. You get a lot of ghosts and wights over here as you get towards the North Downs. And finally the fun... and the Tol Rinnan. There's a whole like dragon settlement here, which is quite fascinating. So the last category, is this zone fun? I always have a blast in the zone. I like look forward to going to the zone, similar to how I look forward to going to the Lone Lands. And so Evendim gets a very high rating. It's an amazing zone. All right, we're almost done now. So Gondor. So this is when you come through the Pass of the Dead and Gondor during the War of the Ring. And so you travel from the east into the west, like we talked about King's Gondor as well. So it's kind of the reverse of King's Gondor. Everything's assaulted and being burned, and you do a lot with the Beacons of Gondor. As you can see, the little fires here. Gondor was great. I really enjoyed it. Paths of the Dead were cool. I really enjoyed Dol Amroth and all of that area. When you get down to Pelagir, there's a really cool epic quest line where you bring the army of the dead. Then you go through all these just really epic, awesome places, and you get to Minas Tirith. So questing wise, it flowed really nicely. I liked it. Landscape wise, I think it gets a significantly lower rating than King's Gondor because everything's burning. It's just smoky and dark and oppressive. Crafting wise, it was really good area for crafting. It's similar to King's Gondor. As you're going through, you can just kind of get all the materials you need. Enemy variety, there's a lot of Haradrim, there's a lot of Corsairs, a lot of Orcs. I just remember I really liked Pelagir. That was a kind of a highlight of this whole area. There's lots of really cool things happening in that regard. And then fun. This was a fun zone. I liked it quite a bit. I think Gondor was a good zone. Okay, and then Outer Gondor. I'm not sure what this screenshot is. Is this referring to Eastern Gondor? There's not an Outer Gondor. This is why I get confused about what kind of Gondor we're talking about. So Outer Gondor, I think it would be this. It would be like Losternak, Lebanon. I think it'd be after Pelagir. I didn't like this nearly as much as Western Gondor. The Pelennor was really cool. That was all fun. South Ithilien was fun. You come across like the Haradrim and Mumakil for the first time. That was really, really good. I liked that. But yeah, you kind of come this way, Losternak, and you travel. There's like a boat travel. You come over here and you rally up with Faramir. This was a cool area. And then you come through Osgiliath. Osgiliath was really fun. I actually really enjoyed Osgiliath. And then you come into Minas Tirith. And I can't remember, I mean, Eastern Gondor, this would be Minas Tirith. Minas Tirith is like my favorite castle in Middle-earth. It was quite annoying to traverse. So the landscape kind of stunk in this whole area. So yeah, landscape kind of got I don't know. It was just so hard to traverse. You either get dismounted because there's so many enemies, or like Minas Tirith or Osgiliath, it's so confusing where you're going. Crafting wise, about the same as the other Gondor zones. I would say this one's less. It was harder to find crafting material in this zone, especially in South Ithilien. Enemy variety, the same as the other Gondor. All of the Gondors are kind of the same, I'll be honest. And then I didn't have as much fun in this zone as Western Gondor. At least I'm assuming this might refer to the Gondor that you play in Umbar, but I would say it's lower than the other Gondor, but still enjoyable, worth a playthrough. Alright, and the final zone is West Rohan. So this would refer to Kingstead, Broadways, Stone Deans, Westfold, Gap of Rohan, Helm's Deep. So there's a lot of really cool epic quests going on. There's a ton of stuff going on with Helm's Deep. Lore-wise, you the player, you're kind of in the midst. It's interesting. You get to kind of play out the events that you see in the books and movies in this whole area. So lore-wise is pretty cool. Questing-wise, it's kind of the questing is not nearly as good as Eastern Rohan, I will say. You kind of just go from area, do a couple quests, go to the next area. I liked the Broadways. I thought that was a fun area. I'm trying to remember. Stone Deans, I don't remember doing anything in. Gap of Rohan, I feel like you just travel here to get to Isengard. Sorry. This is when I'm becoming less of a fan of the map. It's really confusing to traverse. So, Helm's Deep was pretty good. The epic quests and everything there were really, really fun. Landscape, it's not as pretty as East Rohan. It's still cool, but it's just not as cool as East Rohan, I think. Crafting wise, I'm trying to remember, the Broad Acres was an excellent place to harvest materials, especially in this Toesbury area. There's a ton of scholar stuff up there. And I remember what I would do on my character when I was leveling this up. I'd go from the Stosbury area and then go down into this camp here and just go back and forth. And I got all the crafting material in prospecting, foresting, and scholar that I needed to tier up. Enemy variety, there is a lot of Dunlendings, there's a lot of orcs. That's about it. I don't remember there being a lot of variety in this zone. There's, of course, wargs. And I can't remember where Fangorn falls into this. Fangorn, you do an interesting, like, you go with Treebeard, you get, like, some cutscenes when he's with Merry and Pippin, and you see, like, the Entmoot. Besides that, Fangorn was kind of like, I think there may have been a raid in here that I didn't end up doing. So, was it fun? Was it fun to go through? I don't remember much of it. Edoras was okay, but I was ready by the time I got to Edoras, I was ready to go into the Paths of the Dead, into the Gondor stuff. So, I think what's going on here? I think West Rohan was not nearly as good as East Rohan, and so I think West Rohan gets kind of the middle. If you're really a player that likes the big epic battles, you probably would rank this higher, but I don't do that. I just solo play. I don't really do any of the big battle stuff unless it's part of the book quest, unless it's a solo instance. So I think West Rohan just kind of gets a neutral rating for me. Didn't like it, didn't dislike it. It wasn't... I think it could have been better, with it being all the pivotal epic moments in the books and movies. So that's the last zone of this tier list. Yeah, these overall, I think Lord of the Rings Online has some really, really good zones. There's only a few I really dislike, and there's only a few that I would avoid questing in. And of course, this is just my opinion. This is what I've experienced in my playthrough of the game.